back to Knowledge Resources Speaker Feature. Today, we're sitting down with Gary Cookson, an internationally regarded expert on workplace performance and the founder and director of Epic HR based in the UK. Gary will be speaking at the upcoming Designing and Managing Hybrid Workplaces conference on the 30th to the 31st of August this year. Gary, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Amy. Hello, everybody. Glad to be here.
Could you just, to kick us off, give us a quick preview of what you'll be speaking about at the upcoming conference and what we have to look forward to?
Yeah, can do, yes. I'm really looking forward to speaking at the conference, and my session is called Whenever, Wherever, which is a play on the Shakira song, of course, but kind of encapsulates what we're faced with in terms of hybrid working at the moment. And I've recently published a book on the topic, but few in organizations really understood over the last couple of years how remote working, now hybrid working, changes the nature of a team, changes the nature of leaders, until the pandemic forced everybody to confront such things. And as we retain remote working and integrate that into a hybrid model, that changes all those things again. It's different than being fully remote when you go hybrid. And we've got a good and real timely opportunity to look at all this again, to get leaders focusing on different things, to help teams to become more comfortable with different ways of working when they're not co-located, and to really understand what it means to work remotely versus what it means to work in the physical workplace. Not just what tasks are done where, but by who and when, and how they operate and how teams collaborate with each other and the culture around such things. So my session is going to be exploring some of those things. I think we've got a golden opportunity to reform the way that work is done, the way decisions are made, the way problems are resolved, and the way people communicate with each other. But there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. And in my session, I'm going to be explaining why that is the case and what we need to do about it.
And I think that's exactly it. I think we have sort of not cemented the approach to hybrid work, as you've said, and we have such an opportunity now to really change that to be fit for purpose and to be fit for what the organization wants to do with it. What is your perspective on that? Do you think our perspective on hybrid work has changed from experimental to becoming more strategic now? Or is that a shift that still needs to happen that we actually have to initiate today?
Well, I think the latter, based on my research and the clients that I speak to and the people that I get in contact with, they're very much the latter. I think many organizations are reacting to the situation as opposed to strategically planning what they need to do. Now, of course, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, reacting was the only thing we could do. We had bigger things to worry about, and then wasn't really the time to think about how teams are set up and how leaders need to operate differently. We're in the middle of a global pandemic, bigger issues at play. But now, as we emerge from the worst of that, we can take a much more conscious, more deliberate view about the way work needs to be, not just where, not just when, but what work is done as well. And that means it needs to be a strategic decision. It's not something that can be left to just the people team or just another team. It's something that needs to be involving everybody in the organization and all the stakeholders for that organization too. It isn't a quick fix. It isn't something you can just click your fingers and suddenly you'll get a hybrid model in place. There's going to be many iterations of this. We're not going to get it right first time. And in my session, I'll help people to understand some of the things that they need to think about in order to learn from previous experiences. Now, we have had lots of experience of enforced remote working for many people over the last couple of years. That's not true remote working. True remote working is not something that you have to do because there's a global pandemic. It's something that needs careful consideration, some job redesign, some organizational redesign as well. We had none of that when the COVID-19 pandemic hit. And why would we? Again, bigger things to worry about. But now we must. We've got to make it noticeably different. Working in the co-located environment versus working in the remote environment. And the label hybrid working, well, that suggests just merging the two together. I think it's a bit of a misleading label, but I haven't got a better one to use other than hybrid. And everybody seems to know what it is. But we need to look at what works in the remote workplace and take that. And we need to look at what works in the face-to-face co-located workplace and take that and build something that's bigger and better than both. And to do that, we can only really do it strategically. We can't react to things. We've got to think very carefully.
It's so interesting that you have sort of looking for a new label for hybrid, because I think we've definitely put it in a box, and sort of, in my experience, organizations have limited themselves to a very specific way that might not be the best way for their organization or fit to purpose for them. So I was wondering what your advice would be. Let's say an organization realizes this isn't a quick fix. We really want to turn it into a strategy. What would be the first step for them to take in order to do that?
Okay, well, the first thing to avoid, I think, is being led by an arbitrary days of the week split, which is to say, 2 days at home, 3 days in the office, that type of split. Being led by that is a mistake. That's the quick fix. Of course, you'll get to that point, but in order to get to that point, you need to take several steps back and really look at work on a very granular level. Again, this is something I'll explore more in my session, but we need to look at task by task, activity by activity. In everybody's job, there are 10, 12 different things that you need to get done. And each one of those will require a very different environment in which it needs to be done, a very different set of technology to be able to do it. And that will mean it can be done either on its own in isolation, away from other people, at any time of your choosing, or it may mean that it has to be done in the same time, same place as other people. And there'll always be in everybody's job both of those, and there's lots of different stages in between too. Everybody's job has got some element that could be lent to a hybrid working approach. There's always going to be some work that needs to be done face to face at fixed times, fixed locations, and there's always going to be other work that doesn't. And some jobs will have a bigger proportion of one than other jobs. So there isn't a one size fits all approach, even for all the jobs in one team, let alone all the teams in one organization or all the organizations put together. It's a very, very granular, detailed approach. So my advice is start small and build from the bottom up. Start looking at individual tasks, look at where and when they need to be done, and work out what environment that needs to take place in, what technology needs to support it. Then look at the next task and the next task. And all of a sudden you've built a job. And then once you've built one job, move on to the next. All of a sudden you've built a team. And then you can move on and upwards and move up that way. So that's my advice.
Now, you've recently published a book called HR for the Hybrid Working, which is congratulations on that. And you discuss some of the practical policies and the activities that we can use for hybrid work. And I'm sure you'll incorporate a lot of that into your presentation, which I think will be very interesting to see. Is there a specific policy that stands out to you? I almost, in a way, don't want to ask this question because I know that we've discussed now that not all hybrid organizations will be the same. But is there one policy perhaps that you really feel that every organization should be implementing?
Okay. Well, you've hinted at the answer I'm going to give here in that there isn't one policy that will work for every organization. So I can't really say there is one thing they need to put in place. And certainly I would advocate against building a hybrid working policy because policies apply to the entire organization. By their very nature, that's what they do. And hybrid working won't work if that's the approach you take. What you do need to make it work is a set of general principles, frameworks within which teams and individuals can contextualize around their own situation, their own circumstances, and come up with something that works for them. But in terms of managing people, leading people, yes, there will be lots of changes at a practical level. And of course, that's what the book is about. And yes, I'd like people to buy the book. And yes, I will be mentioning it as part of my session too. But everything changes. The kinds of people practices that you operated when everybody was face to face and co-located are not the same when people are remote or when they're hybrid. It's almost like we need to plan for 3 different types of employee experience. One for those who are fully remote, one for those who are fully face-to-face, and then this great big amorphous mass in the middle who are hybrid. And everything changes at that point. So think about the employee life cycle, which is what the book does. And there's a chapter on each of the different parts of the life cycle in the book, starting with recruitment and looking at what needs to change in the way that we do recruitment, the way that we hire people and onboard them and induct them, through to the way that we offboard them at the end of that experience. In between times, we need to look at pay and pay structures and look at whether that's different and it is, for a hybrid workforce and some of the rewards and benefits that we give such people. Then we need to build other policies and procedures to do with things like absence management. Definitely needs to change. The way we manage performance, the way we manage disciplinary and grievance type issues, the way we support employee well-being needs to change for a hybrid workforce too. And all things to do with learning and development need to be adapted, as well as things to do with diversity and inclusion too. So there's a very, very wide range. And I would suggest that it's almost every policy that an organization would have to do with its people that needs to be looked at so that it can cope with hybrid working. And of course, there's a whole book in that.
I love how you split it into 3 different groups. I think it's the first time I've ever heard someone do that. It's generally considered that just a hybrid workplace is remote and hybrid combined. Have you found in your experience that perhaps the models that people build lean more towards remote work in its entirely, and perhaps don't really pay enough attention to hybrid work as a concept itself?
I think, yes, you're right. I don't think there are many organizations who have got this perfectly right at the moment. There are a few, and in the book, I've got some case studies that I share of people's developing experiences with things. So there's lots of mistakes being made, lots of lessons being learned, and generally people moving on. What we need to make sure is that we don't just try to replicate one workplace in the other. So, for example, lifting and shifting everything you did face to face and doing it in a remote environment is not really going to work. And the same is true in reverse. Lifting and shifting everything you do remotely into a face to face environment is also not going to work. Hybrid working is something different, something unique. And it's something that's going to be very attractive to many people if it's done in the right way. Lots of people don't want to go back to the office full time, but most people want to go back to the office for some of their time. Equally, lots of people don't like the idea of working remotely all their time, but they'd quite like to do it some of their time. So we're pushing at an open door now as employers. We've got people where we want them to be, and we are where they want us to be as well. We've got this perhaps once in a lifetime opportunity to change what work is, to build something new, something better for all concerned. And we can't do that by trying to do things the way we've always done them, by trying to operate the workplace the way we used to when everybody was face to face, or the way we've had to when everybody's been remote over the last 2 years. This is something different.
And on that very inspiring call to arms, I think I should say thank you so much for joining us, Gary. Really has been insightful. It's actually very much motivated me to really look at, I can't say our hybrid policy, but the hybrid policies in general, and really look at the way we can redefine work and that opportunity. I'm really looking forward to your presentation specifically, and anyone who would like to see that, more than welcome to sign up by using the link that will be available in the description. Thank you so much, Gary.
Thanks, Amy.